When it comes to football managers, there aren't many out there that can say they've spent more than a decade with the club, but Brian Lawes' spell with Scunthorpe laid foundations that have been reflected in the club's most recent success. Lawes' playing career began in 1979 when he signed professional terms with Burnley after graduating from the famous Wallsend Boys Club. Spells with Huddersfield and Middlesbrough passed before Lawes joined the wonderful Brian Clough at Nottingham Forest. He later joined Grimsby Town where his managerial apprenticeship began, before eventually finding his way to Scunthorpe via Darlington. Privileged to say Brian joins me for a chat now about his career. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. What better way to start than asking you where it all began for you, Brian? Wallsend Boys Club.
Well, way back in the late 70s, Wallsend Boys Club was the focal point of my life. It was a small footballing club which enticed youngsters off the street. That was one of the main aspects of it, but it was so well run and professionally run. It became very, very successful, and it was a pleasure being part of it. I spent most of my days there as a teenager, and played for Wallsend Boys Club, and of course that's where I got my first opportunities to go into football, and it's been a hotbed ever since. There's a huge amount of players that have come out of Wallsend Boys Club. Most of them, so Alan Shearer is probably one of the top names out there, along with Steve Bruce, myself, Peter Beardsley. There's about 60 odd players that have come out of that small town boys club and gone into the professional game and had real success with it. And the Carricks are the ones that are very familiar to a lot of people, particularly Man United and again Wallsend Boys Club through and through. So it just shows you the conveyor belt, not only from the 70s, but has continued all the way through the 80s, 90s, and now into this current time.
Good. Obviously, you started your career with your playing career with Burnley, moved to Huddersfield, but I just want to touch on the time when you was with Middlesbrough. It was a bit of a roller coaster.
Oh, roller coaster is just an understatement. Middlesbrough was in a club in decline when I first arrived. I felt it was a great opportunity for me to go back to the northeast to get closer towards my family. Mm-hmm. We're all still in the northeast, but going to Middlesbrough at Ayton Park, had I known now what I was going to, perhaps I might not have turned up. I think my ignorance of the situation probably was one of the reasons why I first went to the football club. But having said that, I thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it. It was a roller coaster. Being in liquidation, administration, the gates being closed on us, we couldn't train anywhere, to losing most of the players, with only I think 12 players left who hadn't been paid for months. Yet we actually rolled up our sleeves, stuck together, and the success with Bruce Rioch at the helm. This is why Middlesbrough ended up in a position where they have been for many years, is in the top part of the league and the Premiership, because of them early days. We had success after success, which it snowballed and got them back into the Championship stroke Premiership.
Yeah, it's certainly when you look at one of your other former clubs, Darlington, at the moment, it's uncanny, really. The connections that can be made with what they're suffering with at the moment.
It is. It sends a shiver down my spine to see it. I never thought it would ever happen again to any other football club, and if it did, I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
No.
However, it was the making of Middlesbrough Football Club as we know it. Darlington Football Club, do they go through that same trapdoor, yet only to survive through the other end? It only remains to be seen. I'd like to think there would be a familiar story if it's all possible.
Definitely.
However, in the current climate and finances as it is, I dread to think what the outcome could possibly be.
We can only hope, Brian.
We can only hope.
Just so after Middlesbrough, you moved on to Nottingham Forest, where you arguably had your best spell as a player. How much of that was down to Brian Clough?
I think the story goes, whilst I was at Middlesbrough, I took a phone call from what I thought was Peter Beagrie at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's been the big prankster at the football club. He already caught me out once before the manager. And I thought it was him putting on a Brian Clough accent. When in truth it was actually Brian Clough himself ringing me at home. And I told Clough he'd get stuffed. Thinking it was Peter Beagrie, but of course it wasn't. And when I put the phone down, never thought anything of it until it rang back about 10 seconds later, and then this real strong voice come on, and I totally knew it was. I made a big
Just quivered in your boots, I bet.
I was quivered. To say I was standing to attention was an understatement. So, from that moment on, it was only one decision I was going to make, was to go and join Nottingham Forest. And the great Brian Clough at the time, it was just absolutely everybody wanted to work under, and it was a privilege, and as you just said, that's 6 years of my career without doubt.
Just one comment that sort of came out of Sheffield Wednesday when you went there was when Dave Allen likened yourself to Clough. How much of Brian's character do you think you took into your own management career?
Well, some might say too much. Having been a real problem period in my early days at Grimsby.
Yeah, I think I know what you're referring to.
I allegedly hit a player, but that's something maybe Cloughy would have done. But other things I think I've done and look back and think, unintentionally I may have gone down the lines of Cloughy syndrome. But I think there's no one could ever copy the great man. And but the one thing is, you do take things on board, and you've got to learn from those great times that you've had within the highs and the lows, and as I have done with many managers that I've worked with, and you like to think you involved all of those in your career somewhere, in your thoughts and your processes when you're in management.
So after your 2-year sort of apprenticeship at Grimsby that you just touched on, you found your way to Scunthorpe as player manager. In your opinion, what was it about your ideas and your management that secured you that job?
Well, the one thing that my full intentions was just to keep playing, and and I did that. That was my whole point of going to Scunthorpe in the first place. And Mick Buxton, who was manager at the time, I wasn't there to put him under pressure at all. Just the way things are in football, and things happen, and I just happened to be there at the time, and it seemed like a good transition for me to take control of Scunthorpe. I like the club, I like the people there, and I felt I could take the club forward. It was an absolute pleasure to be part of the setup for 10 years, and to feel that we put some solid bricks in the foundation, of which other managers can actually build off. And the club's had some real glorious times in those 10 years, and the pinnacle has to be the fact that they've found themselves in the championship. And, with good, obviously good financial background and support from Steve Wharton, the chairman, it gave me the great belief and stability to look long term rather than just looking over your shoulder for the next result.
Can you remember when you actually first got the job? Were you given any sort of criteria, as in what was expected of you to achieve, as in positions or promotion, or what? Can you remember? Or
well, I think whenever you take over a football club, they're generally in decline, unless somebody leaves me to go to bigger things.
Yeah.
There's two ends of the spectrum. I took over Scunthorpe when they're on a real downer, and the criteria really was to make sure we stay in the division and see if we can try and aim for the playoffs at some stage in the future. When I left, we were already on a promotion run, and it was a case of leaving a good squad behind and allowing that squad to stay together, and it flourished into a promotional team into the championship. So two ends of the spectrum, the criteria were, I'm sure for Nigel Atkins, was to continue the good work and to get them in the next league, and he did that very successfully. So Yeah, you've got to look on the short term, because winning games is the most important thing, and as they find themselves at the moment, I think when you start the season, you look at the long term. You're looking at the bigger picture and hoping that the club are in the promotion push. But at this stage of the season, you have to change your thoughts, and you may have to think now, and as they are doing, thinking about survival.
I just want to sort of take you back to the 99-2000 season. There was a bit of a continental influx, shall we say, with Cava Garcia, Clint Marcel, Guy Pua, Lionel Perez. Was that intentional, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to broaden all your thoughts, and certainly your sights on bringing other players in. You can't just close your mind and think, well, I'm not prepared to listen or talk to or watch foreign players. They're already starting to come into the game, and I think it was just us broadening our minds and broadening our, and really bringing a little bit of, as you said, continental football to Scunthorpe. The hardest part was persuading them to come.
Yeah.
Once they were in, they loved it, and it just brought a little bit of special flavour to the club, and the players thoroughly enjoyed it. We had great camaraderie, and I think Alex Calvo Garcia is probably the one that will go down in folklore for scoring the winning goal at Wembley to get us promoted. So
definitely. Certainly a personal hero of mine, Brian.
He's what?
He's certainly a personal hero of mine.
Oh yeah, and he will be, and his association with Scunthorpe now will be there forevermore, and he is a legend there now and will always be.
Definitely. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to just touch on the 03-04 season when you infamously left the club and then returned to save us from relegation. The following season, we won promotion. Can you just talk me through those 18 months? How it was a strange one.
Well, I think strange was again an understatement. I felt at the time when Steve Wharton had stepped down from being chairman, which stepped aside and allowed other people to run the football club. I think that was the demise of the football club in all aspects, because the thought process has changed dramatically. I didn't see a vision there anymore, only problems, and of course I decided that I think that time was enough, and decided to walk. However, Steve Wharton, again thinking well ahead, didn't like what he was saying, and changed all that within 3 weeks, and asked me to come back, of which I was delighted to do that, as long as he was at the helm, which he did. And from that turning point, the important thing for us was to stay in division, because we were such a spiral. The club was going down, possibly out of football, the football league, and we really have to wait till our last game of the season. So from that moment on, we said we'd never go back to that situation again, and all the hard work started from that moment on, where we really pinpointed the exact positions we needed to fulfill, and we really went out there to get them. And we only needed 3 or 4 players, and 3 players in particular: the Musselwhite, the goalkeeper, Joe Murphy we got as well. Did Joe Murphy we got that year?
No, I think that was we were already in League One then. I think it wasn't.
Yeah, it was Musselwhite,
Barrowclough, I think, was it? Or
Barrowclough and Big Torps as well.
Yeah.
And right down the spine of the centre, and of course we embraced that with Andy Crosby, who were leaders, every one of them, and that was the backbone of the team, and the success was always evolved around those 4 players.
Sort of, when I think back, anyway, this might sound a little bit unfair to other positions, but I almost divide your time with Scunthorpe by the successful strike forces that you built. you go right back to the beginning with the John Eyre era, then the Jamie Forrester, then Carruthers, Apua, McLean, Torpey, Sharp. For an ex-defender, you seem to have a knack of finding strikers.
Yeah.
Why was that?
No, I have no idea. Brian Clough, he was an outstanding striker, but couldn't find one.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I was very fortunate being at the right place at the right time with certain players. You might call it a knack, but if you keep doing it yearly, it becomes easier, because it's easier to create interest from strikers to come to a club like Scunthorpe if they feel they can progress themselves. And I don't think there was a season that I was in charge that we didn't have a player who could score 20 goals or more.
Mm.
And that was the major success in bringing in quality players, particularly strikers who can score goals, building them up, moving them on, selling them on, and bring somebody else in. And it was a conveyor belt of strikers that we had for nearly a decade. The conveyor belt stopped at this moment in time. The last obviously was Hooper.
Yeah.
Where's the next one coming? And that's the thing that worries me for Scunthorpe United, because the assets are the most important thing for the football club, and I mean that by the players. And Scunthorpe United always survive, particularly when they've gone and sold a player. It keeps them going. In fact, it makes them stronger. But over the last couple of seasons, I'm not so sure where that's going to come from or where the next one's coming from. Hopefully Alan Neil will pick out and maybe find a diamond somewhere. Mm. That was the program which we set ourselves, was find a rough diamond, polish it up, and hopefully it will sparkle enough to attract attention. And of course, as I said, we've done that for a decade or so, but now we have to go back to the basics again.
Yeah. So when you left Scunthorpe early in 2006, certainly no one could argue that you were moving on to a bigger club. But was there any sort of what might have been feelings, for yourself on a personal level, given that we went on to win the league and arguably had the greatest season in our history?
I mean, that was a big call, because I knew we had a team that was just so well drilled, and every player knew each other inside out. They knew their roles and responsibilities, and it was a well-oiled machine that just churned out great results week in, week out. And it had a great team spirit, which was built within. And to leave that was a real tough decision. I mean, the amount of players that were banging on my door to say, "Don't go," it was incredible. Mm. Yeah, we, like footballers, managers do have, at times you feel that, when is the time? I could have stayed there and sort of retired there at Scunthorpe United. Would that have been right? Or when a club like Sheffield Wednesday come along, who are having gates of between 25 and 30,000 week in, week out, they're a team that, given the right funding, without doubt, will go in one direction. Mm. And that's all. But I found myself in a trap, really, where once I got there, I didn't realise when it unfolded the financial situation that the club was actually in.
Right.
So when I look back, there'll be a few things to regret, but there was no regret whatsoever about going at the time, because I think it was right for me. And let me tell you, I enjoyed it thoroughly. I think the Sheffield Wednesday fans were awesome towards me. I've got great memories. I'm currently one of their longest serving managers, which was a great achievement in itself. Mm. You look at, when I first arrived there, they had 9 managers in 10 years. So that told you that the stability, they needed stability, and I felt I brought that to the football club. I spent 3 years there, and in that period, achieved something that nobody else has done in the last 96 years, and that is to do the Derby double. And again, that's something I, hold dear to my heart, and I'll never forget.
Yeah, I was. My next question was just going to touch on that achievement, Ryan. I kind of wanted to know, like, when you achieve something like that, do you feel the passion, or is it just another game? As a manager, as in you just got to win a game, or or do you really feel that sort of that passion? That overwhelming.
I think you feel everything on that occasion, and the passion, desire, everything. You feel it for the football club, for the players, for the fans in particular. It was just elation. It was one of those moments in your life. It sends the hairs on the back of your neck in the air, and in Sheffield, that's all they talk about. It's like that's all they're bothered about. It. It's not where you are in the league. It's can you beat your neighbours? It goes in the red, and it's and to be part of that, well, and to go down in history as one of the first managers to do that. Well, as I said, it's a great memory. I love my time there. Love the supporters and the football club, and all I can wish them is success. And now that they've got a new chairman in charge, I'm quite envious for the reason that after I'd taken over, I ended up with no chairman for 18 months, and it was a rudderless ship, no guidance. So that was a good learning curve for me to work without a chairman and no money. But now I see a new chairman coming in who has got a real foresight in the future and where he wants to take the club. And I think, as I said earlier, that football club with the right backing and with the right money and the right man in charge, that club is going back to the Premiership.
So the season that you left, obviously the club were relegated. Do you think that yourself and Russ Wilcox could have kept the club up, or was it just a case of it was just all too late, basically?
Well, we left. When we left, I mean, this is these are things that who's got a crystal ball.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I did believe was I got everything out of the players, and they were exhausted. We had no money, couldn't change the players. We needed new fresh blood. There wasn't any fresh blood to come in. So what can change? If it can't be the players, then it may be a different voice that may have. And I totally understand where the club were coming from. As I said, I exhausted the players to get every drop out of them, and great credit to them. They gave up their all while I was in the football club. But I left when I had time on their hands and to get back to stay in the division. And there's still 20 odd games left, and the new voice. It certainly sprung the results early on in our Irvine's period. But again, you had to exhaust those same players, and eventually they went down. But that it's unfortunate that finances and the tight budgets that we were playing with were the main culprit.
Just to kind of go back to the Scunthorpe thing, and you probably asked this by any Scunthorpe fan, was there any truth that you were interested in returning to the club last season? And if not, what about the future?
Well, that was one thing that was spoken about, but I didn't, and I spoke to Steve Warren about it. That we both didn't think it was the right thing to do at that time.
Right.
I needed a rest. I hadn't had a rest for 17 years in management, and I took a conscious decision to stay out for 12 months. Now I've done that, I'm now itching to get back in, and never say never. There's one thing that you can't take away from me, and that is the fact that I've still got a lot of affection for the football club. Have done and always will do, no matter whether I'll be back there again or not. I never thought or dreamed of the fact that I'd be living in Scunthorpe when I first arrived. Now I feel part of the town. I still live here. I've got a family, who are settled in this town, and I can't see me moving. So you can't get me away from school, I'm afraid. So
whoever knows, who knows?
Yeah, who knows?